Hey, I'm Jeffrey McCullough, and I am so excited to get this episode started that I'm probably going to cut myself off. There are so many pieces to the puzzle when it comes to constructing a racing game. We went over one of these aspects in a previous video where we talked about boost mechanics, but I'm more talking about broad strokes. Your vehicle is only one half of the equation. The physics, the gameplay around driving and how to go faster, this is only one half of the puzzle. After all, you can't have a racing game without some place to wheel around on. There is a ton of thought that goes into making amazing racetracks for players to drive around. How long is it? How difficult is it? What cool gameplay elements are we trying to bring out of the players through this track? These are just one of the several elements we'll be going over in today's video. This is Design Doc, a series about seemingly simple game mechanics. On today's episode, circuit creation. Now this is going to be a cool episode because previously I would pick a couple of games or a handful of games and talk about how their gameplay design decisions shaped the game. But since this episode is more about the behind the scenes creation of video games, I get to talk about my previous experiences with designing tracks for racing games. Back in 2019, I was honored to have one of my tracks, Coastal Temple Zone, be included in a major update for a fan-made racing game called Sonic Robo Blast Kart 2. SRB 2K is a fan-made racing game made in the Doom engine that seeks to emulate the classic Mario Kart titles. It's got graphics that look straight out of the SNES Super Mario Kart game, with gameplay that more closely resembles the modern Mario Kart games. You've got items, you've got drifting, you've got boosting, all wrapped up in a very nice looking retro package that's designed to evoke the classic Sonic titles. And seeing how it's a fan-made game, hundreds of players flock to make their own tracks, characters, gameplay modes, and anything under the sun. And when it comes to me, if you put a map editor in your game, I will use it. Now, I'm going to talk about the steps I took in order to take my track from paper to playing. And all these tips can be used for any racing game, not just kart racers or specifically this one game. So let's begin. The first thing you need to start out with is a pitch. Now, a pitch is pretty much what you'd write on the back of a book in order to entice people to pick it up and read it. It's a synopsis about what things you want to bring out of players with your track. It's also a great way to set up what aesthetics you want to have with your track. So I'll begin by reading off the pitch I wrote for creating Coastal Temple Zone. Race in and around a golden temple, navigate a difficult and tight ruin section, and find ways to cut through the rough grass at the top of the cliffs to secure first place. Now this pitch is important for establishing the setting and vibe you want for your track. This is the glue that's going to hold your whole track together and determine the design choices out from there. Once you have the general idea of what your track wants to look like, you then move on to designing what are called set pieces. Now when it pertains to racing games, set pieces are the most memorable parts of the track. Now these are defining moments of the track, whether that be a really difficult section, sections that are designed to allow passes and cool combat, or just really cool looking aesthetic pieces to your map. These are the places that your players are going to remember playing your track. Now you are coming up with these set pieces without really having an idea of what your shape of the track is going to look like yet. So before I plotted out what turns go where, I was already putting down exactly the kind of set pieces I want to have in my track. One of the biggest things I wanted to get across in my map is that you really were going up and down in this labyrinth of a castle on the side of a cliff. In order to get this across, I wanted to start it out with a bang, with a huge drop to the bottom of the map. Players will navigate these exit tunnels and pop out to the outside where you see the sunken ruins section. Then I wanted players to slowly, over the course of the track, rise to the top of the cliff to come back to the start line and drop all the way back down again. And it was this simple concept that shaped all the design decisions I wanted to make for my track. So the set pieces I came up with for the track were the tunnels that lead you in and out of the main temple area, an outside ruin section with no walls, making it very difficult. I wanted that slow climb upwards. I wanted that scenic top of the cliff shot to show off how high above the stage you are. And then finally, another tunnel to sort of bookend the track. So like I said, all of these set pieces have not been connected together yet at this stage of planning. These are all ideas I want to get across using the theme of my map derived from the pitch I made earlier. And now that we've sketched out all the set pieces we want to have, now we start to get an idea of how we want to connect them together. And this is where we talk about pacing. Now, how you pace your track is going to vary wildly based on what game you're making the track for. or what kind of game you're designing. Sonic Robo Blast 2 Kart is very much about using drifts in order to get speed boost in order to go fast. So the kind of corners we want to make are more long, winding corners that players are able to drift, get good lines on, and speed boost past the straightaway. Now, what I'm talking about when I say pacing is that you want to avoid having players go through the same thing over and over and over and over again, unless that's the goal of your track. Successfully varying up the difficulty, aesthetics, and turns of your racetrack will lead to good pacing. The set pieces are going to be what players remember most about your map. So take all the set pieces you designed for your track and order them in a way so that your track is paced really well. Vary up the difficulty, vary up the turn structure, and vary up straightaways. Try and make it so that each section of your map has a different feel and requires different tactics to navigate. Once you've ordered your set pieces, then you can start plotting them down on a track, and by connecting them with hallways or tunnels or other filler, as it were. Now, these are not areas of the track that your players are going to remember, but they're a necessary part of tracks in order to get you from one destination to the other. These could just be tunnels, they could be just hallways, they could just be ramps. However, if your game has elements such as items or speed pads or anything like that, you can use those to spice up these otherwise boring connector pieces in order to spice them up and have players think about what racing lines they want to take through them. So, now that you've developed your pitch, created your set pieces, and finally connected them together, you now have your track. Now, nothing is done well in the first draft. Once you get your set pieces and your connectors together, you then sort of start having second thoughts of maybe I want to shift this around here, maybe this is more aesthetically pleasing. This is where you really start molding your track like clay. And there you have it. That's the very basics of how to design a map and get it ready for you to model it in whatever program you're using to design your track. The worst thing that you can do is design the track on the fly. It's sort of like comics writing 101. You want to write the words inside of the speech bubble before surrounding it in the speech bubble. Because if you limit yourself with the outline of a speech bubble, it's really hard to go back and adjust to any text inside without having to completely erase the bubble around it and redraw it. And like I said, this method of planning a track works for any video game, whether it be an arcade racing game or a sim racing game. For example, set pieces in a sim racing game might be a hairpin turn that's used to set up passes for a straightaway afterwards. Maybe it could be a series of S's designed to test your player's speed control, and then it's about connecting those set pieces into a full cohesive track. So there you have it. I really hope you learned something this episode about what it takes to design a racing track for your favorite racing games. I'm Geoffrey McCullough, and I'll see you out there on the track.